Wait, pause for a second. Something quiet, something almost invisible has just shifted, and you probably felt it before you even opened this video. That little tug in your chest when you weren't doing anything important. That strange, soft heaviness that came out of nowhere last night, or maybe earlier today. You brushed it off. You told yourself it was nothing. But somewhere out there, your person was sitting in their car, hands gripping the steering wheel, and someone had just said your name in a way they weren't ready to hear. And what came out of their mouth next, what they whispered when they thought no one could hear them, it's the reason you ended up here. If this message speaks to your heart, comment, "I receive this love," like the video, and subscribe for more. Let me take you back to last night. Because the picture matters. The setting matters. It wasn't dramatic. There was no storm, no big moment building up. It was just a regular evening. The kind of night your person almost didn't go out for. They almost stayed home. They almost canceled. But something pulled them out the door, and they didn't know why. They told themselves they needed to get out of their head. They told themselves they were tired of sitting alone with their thoughts. So they put on something casual, grabbed their keys, and met up with a few friends at a place they'd been to 100 times before. The lighting was warm. The music was low enough that you could still hear conversations from the next table. There were maybe 4 or 5 of them, sitting around, laughing about something stupid that happened at work. Drinks in hand. Nothing serious. Nothing memorable. Just the kind of night where you forget what day of the week it is. And your person was laughing. They were actually laughing. For the first time in a while, they felt almost normal again. Almost. But here's the thing nobody tells you about pretending to be fine. It only works until something cracks the surface. And tonight, something cracked. It started with a question. A small, throwaway question from someone at the table. Someone who knew your person before all of this. Before the silence. Before the distance. Before whatever happened between you two that neither of you have fully processed. This person, this third party, didn't mean anything by it. They weren't trying to stir something up. They asked it the way people ask casual questions, half distracted, half curious. They mentioned your name, just like that. In the middle of a sentence about something else entirely. They asked, "Hey, whatever happened with you and them?" And that was it. That was the moment. Stay with this, because there's a deeper emotional layer here that you need to feel before we go further. Your person froze. Just for a second. Just long enough that no one else really noticed. They took a sip of their drink to cover it up. They smiled the kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. And they said something vague. Something like, you know how it is. Things just kind of faded. But the third party didn't let it go. Not because they were being nosy, but because they remembered something. They remembered how your person used to talk about you. They remembered the way your person's whole face changed when your name came up back then. And they said something that your person didn't see coming. They said, "You know what's funny? I always thought you two were the real thing. Like, I genuinely thought that one was different." And that line, that one sentence, it landed somewhere deep. Somewhere your person had been protecting for months. Because here's what nobody at that table knew. Your person had been telling themselves a story. A story about how it wasn't that serious. A story about how they were fine. A story about how they had moved on, or at least started to. And every time they repeated that story to themselves, it got a little easier to believe. Until tonight. Until someone who had no agenda, no stake in the situation, just casually said the truth out loud. The truth your person had been running from. Something about this moment felt different for them. They didn't know why. They couldn't explain it. But suddenly the conversation around them got a little muffled, like they were hearing it through water. and their grip on the glass got a little tighter, and they reached for another drink before they finished the one they had. This is where understanding slowly begins, because what the third party said wasn't shocking. It wasn't groundbreaking. It wasn't anything your person hadn't quietly thought 100 times in the dark. But hearing it from someone else, from a voice outside their own head, did something they weren't prepared for. It made it real. It made it impossible to keep pretending. And the worst part? They couldn't even argue with it. They couldn't laugh it off. They couldn't say, "No, you wrong, it wasn't like that." Because deep down, they knew it was exactly like that. So they did what people do when they don't want to feel something. They drank a little more. They laughed a little louder. They tried to change the subject. And for a while, it almost worked. The conversation moved on. Someone told a story about their dog. Someone else complained about their boss. The night kept going. But your person? Their mind was somewhere else now. Somewhere they hadn't let themselves go in a long time. They were thinking about you. And not in the way they usually allowed themselves to think about you. Not in the surface way. Not in the, "I wonder how they redoing" way. They were thinking about specific things. Specific moments. The kind of memories that come back when your defenses are down. They remembered a conversation you two had once, late at night, when you said something that made them quiet for a long time afterwards. They couldn't even remember exactly what you said anymore. But they remembered how it made them feel. Seen. Like, really seen. In a way they hadn't felt before, and haven't felt since. What happens next isn't loud, but it changes everything. They started doing the thing people do when something is starting to break inside them. They started replaying the small moments. Not the big fights. Not the dramatic stuff. The small stuff. The way you laughed at something that wasn't even that funny. The way you looked at them once when they were being too hard on themselves. A specific phrase you used to say. A specific tone in your voice when you said their name. They didn't expect this feeling to return so suddenly. So sharp. So clear. Like someone had reached into a drawer they had locked months ago and pulled everything out at once. And then the music in the bar changed. And they don't even know if it was a song they associated with you. Maybe it was. Maybe it wasn't. But it was the kind of slow, quiet song that makes a room feel smaller. And in that moment, with that song playing, with that one sentence still echoing in their head, "I always thought you two were the real thing," something in your person quietly broke. They didn't show it. Of course they didn't. They not that kind of person. They smiled. They nodded along to whatever someone was saying. But inside, there was this slow, awful realization starting to form. The kind that doesn't hit all at once. The kind that creeps in. Maybe I let go too quickly. That was the thought. Just that one thought. Sitting there in the middle of all the other noise. Maybe I let go too quickly. If this resonates, let it settle in you. You don't need to do anything with it yet. Just let it land. About an hour later, your person made an excuse to leave. They said they had an early morning. They said they were tired. The truth was, they couldn't sit in that booth for another minute pretending to be fine. So they grabbed their jacket, said their goodbyes, and walked out into the cold. And the second the door closed behind them, the second they were alone in the parking lot, something in them just gave out. They got to their car. They sat down. They closed the door. And they didn't drive off right away. They just sat there, in the dark, hands on the wheel, engine off, looking at nothing. And that's where the tears came from. Not loud, ugly crying. Not the dramatic kind. The quiet kind. The kind that just slips out of you when you've been holding something in for too long. The kind that surprises even you. They sat there in the silence. And the thing about silence is, it doesn't let you hide. It doesn't let you keep pretending. And in that silence, in that car, with one hand on the wheel and the other pressed against their forehead, they whispered something. They said it under their breath, so softly that even they barely heard it. They said your name, just your name, nothing else at first, just your name, like it was a question. Like they were asking the universe why this was hitting them like this, on a random Tuesday night, after a casual comment from someone who had no idea what they were unlocking. And this is the part they were still trying to understand. Because they thought they had processed this. They thought they had moved through it. They thought, time would do its thing, and they would slowly forget the way you made them feel. They would slowly forget the way the room got quieter when you walked in. The way conversations with you didn't feel like work. The way they could be themselves around you in a way they couldn't be around almost anyone else. They thought time would dilute all of that. Make it less sharp, less real. And maybe it had, for a while. But tonight? Tonight. It all came rushing back. And they couldn't pretend anymore. Then they whispered something else. And this is the part that matters. This is the part you came here for. They said, I think I made a mistake. That's it. That's what they said. 5 words. Whispered into a steering wheel in a parking lot at almost midnight. I think I made a mistake. Now stay with me here. Because this isn't about you celebrating their pain. This isn't about you feeling vindicated. This isn't about being right or being chosen. This is about something quieter. Something deeper. This is about a real human being finally allowing themselves to feel what they had been refusing to feel for a long, long time. Because here's the thing about pride. Pride is loud, but it's also exhausting. And tonight, your person was just too tired to keep carrying it. They sat in that car for a while. I don't know how long. Long enough for the windows to fog up a little. Long enough for them to wipe their face more than once. And in that quiet, alone, with no one watching, they started thinking about what they had been avoiding. They started thinking about what they had blamed you for. What they had told themselves about why it didn't work. And one by one, those stories started to fall apart. Because here's what the third party's comment really did. It wasn't just a passing remark. It was a mirror. And your person, for the first time in a long time, saw their own reflection clearly in it. They saw the way they had walked away. They saw the things they had said that they didn't really mean. They saw the moments where they could have stayed, could have asked, could have listened, but chose not to. Not because they didn't care, but because caring felt like too much. Because caring meant letting themselves be vulnerable in a way they weren't ready for back then. And now? Now they're ready. And it's a different kind of pain to be ready for someone after the moment has passed. You don't need to force this, just feel it. In that car, your person started doing something they hadn't allowed themselves to do. They started imagining what it would be like to reach out. Not in a desperate way. Not in a, please come back, kind of way. Just a soft, simple, honest message. They started drafting it in their head. They started and stopped 100 times. What would they even say? Hey, I was just thinking about you. Too casual. I owe you an apology. Too heavy. I miss you. Too much. Too soon. Too vulnerable. Every version felt either too small or too big. And eventually, they put their phone down. They didn't send anything. Not last night. They couldn't. They weren't ready to face what your reply might be. Or worse, what your silence might mean. So they sat there a little longer. They pulled themselves together the way people do when they have to drive home alone. They turned the car on. The headlights came on. And they drove home in silence. No music. No podcast. Just the road and their thoughts. And here's where something shifted permanently. Something that's still unfolding right now, even as you re-listening to this. Because your person didn't go to sleep last night the same as they woke up yesterday. Something inside them rearranged, quietly, without permission. The way real change always happens. Not in big moments, not in declarations, but in small, late-night realizations that you can't undo once you've had them. They lay in bed, they looked at the ceiling, and they thought about you in a different way than they had been thinking about you for months. Not as a regret to manage, not as a story to rewrite, but as a real person they had loved, a real person they had pushed away, a real person they were starting to understand they hadn't actually stopped caring about, they had just gotten very good at pretending they had. This is the part they didn't see coming. They thought about all the times they had told themselves they were over it. Every time they had said it to a friend. Every time they had said it to themselves in the mirror. And they realized something that's hard to admit. They realized you don't say you over something that often unless you trying very hard to convince yourself. And maybe that's been the problem this whole time. Not that they didn't feel anything, but that they felt too much, and they didn't know what to do with it. So they buried it, they covered it, they drank around it, they dated around it, they worked around it. They built a whole life designed to keep them just busy enough to never have to look at it directly. And tonight, in one casual sentence, all of that scaffolding came down. What happens next isn't loud, but it matters more than they realize. Because once you see something clearly, you can't unsee it. Once you feel something honestly, you can't pretend it's not there. And your person, somewhere right now as you hearing this, is moving through a slow, quiet shift. They not going to call you tomorrow. They might not call you next week. This kind of change doesn't move on a clean timeline. But the seed has been planted. The honesty has surfaced. The truth has been spoken, even if only in a whisper, in a parked car, to no one. And here's what I want you to hold on to. Not the drama of it, not the satisfaction of being missed, but the quiet truth underneath it all. You were never the small thing they made you out to be. You were never the chapter they tried to close. You were the one they didn't know how to hold, so they let go. And now they starting to understand the difference. There's an old line, something close to love is patient, love is kind. Most people forget the next part. It says love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. And maybe that's what this whole strange, painful, drawn-out season has been. Not punishment, not abandonment, but endurance. The kind of love that doesn't burn fast and disappear, but the kind that lingers underneath, waiting for the right moment to be acknowledged. By them, by you, by both. If you felt this shift too, you already understand what I am saying. Because while your person was sitting in that car last night, you were probably doing something completely ordinary. Maybe you were getting ready for bed. Maybe you were scrolling on your phone. Maybe you were just lying there, feeling that strange weight in your chest you couldn't explain. And you didn't know why. Now you know. Or at least, now you have a sense. This is what divine timing actually feels like, by the way. It doesn't feel like fireworks. It doesn't feel like signs in the sky. It feels like quiet. It feels like a small ache. It feels like a thought that won't leave you alone. It feels like both of you, in different places, finally starting to feel the same thing at the same time, even though neither of you has said anything yet. And here's the thing about timing. It almost never feels right when it's happening. It almost always feels late. It almost always feels like it should have come sooner. But there's a reason it didn't. There's a reason your person had to sit in that car alone last night. There's a reason it had to come from someone else's mouth. Because if you had said it, they would have defended themselves. If you had brought it up, they would have shut down. It had to come from outside. It had to come from someone with no agenda. It had to come in a moment they couldn't prepare for. That's how the wall finally came down. And now what? Now you wait. Not in the painful, watching the phone kind of way. Not in the please reach out kind of way. You wait the way someone waits when they already know. With peace. With softness. With your own life intact. Because the truth is, you don't need to do anything with this information. You don't need to reach out first. You don't need to set anything up. The shift has already happened. The work is happening on their side now. And whatever it leads to, whether it's a message next week, or a strange coincidence next month, or something else entirely, you're going to be okay. Because the version of you that this moment is finding is not the version of you that was waiting for them. You've grown. You've quieted down inside. You've stopped chasing. You've stopped explaining yourself. And that's exactly why this is happening now, and not before. They couldn't see you when you were trying so hard to be seen. They could only see you once they had to look without the noise. So tonight, when you go to sleep, I want you to release something. Not them. Just the version of yourself that's been carrying this so heavily. Let it sit on a shelf for a while. Let it be theirs to figure out. Your part is almost done. The part where you had to wait, the part where you had to wonder, the part where you had to question yourself, that's closing. Quietly. Without ceremony. And what they're beginning to realize now, is something they can't walk away from anymore. Not this time.